You know, it's been nearly 40 years since an accident spiraled into a global tragedy. But this wasn't just about failing technology. It was a human failure, a failure to tell the truth. This is the story of what happens when a system decides that its own reputation is more important than anything else, no matter the cost.
1:23 in the morning. In one single catastrophic minute in northern Ukraine, a routine safety test at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant goes horribly, horribly wrong. Reactor number 4 explodes. And just like that, a nightmare began, cloaked in darkness and secrecy.
And really, this is the heart of what we're talking about today. In those first critical hours after the explosion, the Soviet government had a choice: admit a devastating failure or cover it up. They chose the lie. And that one decision had consequences that, believe it or not, are still unfolding to this very day.
So how on earth did this happen? Let's dive into the event itself and the immediate response, which, as you'll see, was shaped less by science and a lot more by an ideology that just couldn't handle the truth.
Okay, so look at this. This shows the massive gap between the official story and what was actually happening. Reports going up the chain of command, they talked about a manageable fire. But the reality, it was an open reactor core, literally spewing a plume of radioactive death straight into the sky. The whole Soviet system was just built to report success, not catastrophe.
Look, this disaster wasn't just one thing going wrong. It was a total perfect storm. The reactor itself, the RBMK, had known design flaws. Then, the operators made some really critical mistakes during a safety test that was pretty badly thought out to begin with. But the real root cause? It was an ideology that insisted the Soviet system did not have these kinds of failures. Admitting something went wrong just wasn't an option.
And this is where that official lie becomes a human tragedy. The decision to keep quiet, to suppress the information, it had an immediate and incredibly deadly price for the people who were closest to the disaster.
Can you just imagine being one of those firefighters? You get the call, it's a fire at the plant, and they tell you it's on the roof. You have no special gear, no warning about what you're really walking into. Some of these men literally picked up pieces of radioactive graphite from the reactor core with their bare hands. They were treated as disposable, sent in to absorb lethal doses of radiation, all to protect a lie.
36. Think about that number. That is how many hours an entire city, almost 50,000 people, lived and breathed and let their kids play outside under a sky filled with invisible poison. The authorities, they knew the danger, but an evacuation, that would be admitting failure. So while they tried to get the story straight, the people of Pripyat were just being irradiated.
But here's the thing about a lie like this. You can't contain it, any more than you can contain radiation. What started as a local disaster quickly spiraled into this huge international incident as a radioactive cloud began its silent journey across all of Europe. This timeline is just staggering when you look at it. For 2 full days as this radioactive cloud is drifting over country after country, Moscow denied everything, even to its own allies. The lie only fell apart when a nuclear plant in Sweden, hundreds of miles away, detected the radiation, figured out where it was coming from, and confronted them. Only then did the Kremlin finally go, okay, yeah, something happened.
And because they lied from the very beginning, the true human cost is still something people argue about. The official Soviet number was 31 deaths. But look at the other estimates. The World Health Organization thinks it's at least 4,000 deaths from cancer. Other studies say it could be 60,000, maybe even more. That first lie is still obscuring the full scale of this tragedy.
And then you add the liquidators, an army of 600,000 men. Soldiers, miners, factory workers, all sent into the most contaminated place on planet Earth. A lot of them had terrible equipment, and for many, there wasn't even a record of how much radiation they were exposed to. Their sacrifice was just immense, and for so many, it was never really acknowledged.
So, when you look back at all this, 4 decades later, what's the actual lesson here? What are we supposed to take away from this story of a technological and ideological collapse?
So you might be thinking, why does this matter now? I mean, it happened decades ago in a country that doesn't even exist anymore. But the lesson of Chernobyl, it isn't really about history or technology. It's about something much, much more fundamental.
At the end of the day,
The Chernobyl lesson is all about the catastrophic power of misinformation. What happens when any powerful group, a government, a company, anyone, chooses to protect its image instead of its people? The consequences can be absolutely immeasurable, and they can last for generations.
And that choice is as real today as it was then. In a world where we're once again talking about nuclear capabilities and international tensions, the need for honesty and transparency in a crisis has never been more critical. The story of Chernobyl is, well, it's a really stark warning.
To really truly understand the cost of that lie, all you have to do is look at what's left behind today. This huge, empty landscape basically frozen in time at the exact moment of the disaster. You know, the city of Pripyat was supposed to have this huge May Day celebration just days after the explosion. The brand new Ferris wheel was all set to open. Instead, it just stands there, silent, rusting, an icon of a future that was stolen from everyone. And if you go inside the buildings, it's like a time capsule. You see schools where lessons just stopped mid-sentence, homes where meals were left on the table. An entire city was cleared out in just a few hours, forcing people to leave almost everything behind. So this entire exclusion zone, this whole 30-kilometer area of abandoned life, it isn't just a monument to a nuclear accident. No, it is a permanent physical scar on the Earth, a monument to what that first choice, the choice to lie, really costs.
40 years later, the zone is still there. The radiation is still there. And that fundamental choice between being transparent and keeping secrets, between protecting people and protecting a reputation, is one we still face all the time. So you just have to ask yourself, have we really learned our lesson?